guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be playing around with the Juvia's Place Magic Palette. This is a thing of beauty. So we're going to be creating 3 different looks using just this palette. One of those looks is the one that I'm wearing today. We're going to do some tutorials. We're going to chat a little bit about this guy, the value, pros, cons, all that jazz. So if that sounds good to you, then just keep on watching. So for those of you who aren't familiar already with Juvia's Place, they are an online-only brand, which means you're not going to find them in the aisles of your local Sephora or Ulta or drugstore. They are a Black-owned makeup brand. They were founded, I think, in 2014 or so, and the founder, basically, her whole complaint was being a woman of color. She had a really hard time finding eyeshadows that actually showed up on her skin tone. So she created these super pigmented, ridiculously blendable, beautiful eyeshadows that don't cost an arm and a leg. So Juvia's Place has quite a few eyeshadow palettes now to choose from, but the one we're going to talk about today is the Magic Palette. Look at this, guys. Is this not just ridiculous? So stunning. It has 16 shades. The pans are absolutely massive, and you've got these really beautiful metallics and also these super buttery mattes to work with. So this palette retails for $35 and you get 57.6 grams of product, which is bananas. That comes out to like 60 cents per gram, which if you watch any other like eyeshadow palette reviews where they do in-depth like value analysis and talk about the price per gram for a lot of high-end eyeshadow palettes, you're looking at spending $2, $3, $4, maybe in some situations like $8 plus per gram. So 60 cents a gram for this is kind of crazy. Obviously though, even if it's very, very reasonably priced, if the eyeshadows don't actually perform, is it still even worth spending the $35 on this palette? I personally think that this is really, really nice quality, especially for the price. These shadows are so pigmented and so buttery, very easy to work with, and they look stunning on the eyes. So I'm going to insert a close-up of some swatches of this palette for you guys so you can see exactly what these shadows look like. These are just finger swatches without any primer or anything. So we have the first 8 shades, which these ones are a little bit more warm toned. You've got 4 mattes and 4 shimmers, and as you can see, all of the shimmery shades have this really beautiful metallic sparkle to them. The mattes are super rich and pigmented. I think the shade Nana and Kogi are just a little bit on the patchy side, but when you actually blend them out on the eyes, it's really not a big deal. You don't really notice it as much. And then the second 8 shades are your more traditionally cool toned. They're your blues, your greens, your purples. Here we have only 2 mattes, and then we have 6 shimmery shades. And these again are just intensely foiled, metallic, and gorgeous. Honestly guys, when they say magic palette, there really is something sort of magical and special about this palette and the formula. All of the metallics have an almost creamy texture to them. They are so buttery and like easy to apply, and they've got so much metallic foiled pigment. I personally think they are applied easier with a finger, especially if you apply them over a glitter glue, which I did not do in the tutorials you guys are going to see later. But having used these and having used just more metallic shadows in general, I think you get a lot more punch if you use a glitter glue. It just really, really intensifies the shine of your shadows. But honestly, even by themselves, these are gorgeous. I think with a brush, you're going to get a more sheer application, but if you really want that punch, use your fingers. And I think that the mattes blend out very well with brushes. They are a little bit more of a dry consistency. They're very finely milled. They're very soft. They are easier to blend, but they are not as creamy of a texture. They're a little bit more dry. I just wouldn't say that they're chalky either. I think that in general, Juvia's Place mattes, because they are so bold, if you're a brand new person to makeup, they are probably going to be a little bit more challenging because they put on so much color at once. So if you're somebody that's kind of like new to makeup, kind of getting your feet wet, you might want to use a light hand with the mattes in this palette because it's easier to kind of layer it and build it than put on too much initially and then try to have to blend it out. To be honest, creating 3 looks with this palette was a piece of cake. I honestly could have created 30 looks with this palette, I'm sure, and they would have been all very different because there is so much going on here. The one thing that is a downside is that there aren't really many transitional neutral colors. Like, this palette to me is the perfect accompaniment to a neutral palette. So if you have something with a lot of browns, a lot of mattes, this can be a perfect source of pops of color. For all the looks I created, since with these like videos, the 3 looks with 1 palette, I only use the palette. I don't add any additional eyeshadows, just to show you the versatility of the palette itself. I kind of had to use this shade Nana as my transition for pretty much everything, and I was able to use this shade Kessie up here as like a brow bone highlight slash blending shade to kind of tone this color down a little bit. So that's the only thing that is kind of very monotonous throughout the looks that I made. But honestly, I didn't even get a chance to use everything in here in the 3 looks that I created. There would be so many more cool things I could do. I definitely want to continue to play with this. I have been loving it. I would recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun if you're someone that likes to experiment with color. So with that being said, why don't we jump into the tutorials for the 3 looks that I created. So for look number 1, I actually was thinking of my mother. I was showing her this palette after I got it and how excited I was, and she was like, "That's cool. How the heck would you ever wear something like that?" My mom is the kind of person who wears very neutral eyeshadows. She pretty much always just puts like a single brown color all over her lids and calls it a day. So I think that she looked at a palette like this and felt very overwhelmed and kind of like, how could you make any kind of look that was appropriate to like wear out of the house or like to work or to school. So that was my first challenge, was like, let me see what I can do with this crazy colorful palette that's a little bit more subdued, a little bit more easily wearable. So what I started out in doing was just kind of setting down my whole eye from lid to brow bone with the shade Kessie, which is that nice like matte cream color. I had put on some eye primer, so I just wanted to make sure that it was all set down and locked into place. Then I went in with a mixture of the shades Nana and Kessie, because Nana is a little bit more vibrant and I kind of wanted to make sure that it was soft. So I toned down Nana with Kessie. I kind of put them both on my brush and then just blended that back and forth in windshield wiper motions into my crease. Then I wanted to add a little pop of metallic sparkle. I couldn't resist using one of these fun foiled shades. So I went in with the shade Zuba, which is a really beautiful pink with like a gold duochromatic shift. And I just used my finger to pat this all over the lid. Then to add some brightness to the inner corner of my eyes on a small little pencil brush, I just patted a little bit of the shade O Sun into the inner corners, which is also a pink, but it's a little bit lighter and a little bit more frosty. It has a more whitish sheen when it catches the light. Then I decided I wanted to just add a little bit more dimension, so I went back in with the shade Nana on a crease brush and just kind of intensified that color in the outer third of my eye, kind of bringing it down in the outer V and then blending it up into the crease. Then I brought that same shade Nana down along the lower lash line with a little smudger brush just to kind of pull the whole thing together. Then we just curled our lashes, add mascara, a little bit of a metallic lip, and then this is the final look. Really soft, really pretty. I think I like the way this came out alive. It's very kind of like pink, a little bit monochromatic, but still wearable for daytime. Then for the second look that I did, I really wanted to play with this purple shade here called xoxo, because I love purple, and this is like a really cool duochromatic blue kind of purple shade, which I was like so into. So I knew I had to do a look using that. So similarly to the last look that we did, I also started out with Nana blending this into the crease, but I kept this a little bit tighter, so I didn't want to blend it down onto the lid, and I used like a little angled brush to be a little bit more precise. I also went a little bit more heavy-handed in this look than in our last look and really kind of amped up the color. I wanted it to be a little bit more concentrated. Then I went in with xoxo using my fingers all over the lid. Such a cool shade for sure. Definitely adds like this really neat iridescent purpley pop on your lids. Then I sort of had this idea to kind of take things in like a weird sort of sunsetty vibe. So I figured with like the sort of warm tones of the transition and the purple on the lid, it would be fun to use one of the blue shades in the palette to amp up the outer corners. So I used the shade Ify, which is like this really dark sort of indigo color on a very small shader brush. And I just started blending this into the outer V of my eye. Now this looked a little bit harsh, so I started to blend it using a like soft shader brush with the shade Fosso again, and I realized when you apply Fosso over Iffy, the blue matte shade, it actually turns into this really cool blue kind of metallic color. So I was like, that looks really neat. Then I had this cool like blue to purple ombre thing going on. So I kind of went back and forth between using Iffy on the shader brush and then blending Fosso on another sort of more flat synthetic brush until I had this really cool kind of gradient look on my eyes. Then I went back in with my little angled brush that I applied Nana with in the beginning, and I went and intensified that shade in the crease because it had started kind of blend away, and that really amped up that sort of like desert sunset vibe. All I could think of was the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette, which I don't own, but I feel like this is a look that would be very similar to something you could create with that palette. Then for the inner corners, I decided to use the shade Umoja, which is this kind of like cool, steely, icy blue color. I thought that might be interesting to add some brightness to the inner corner and keep things kind of a little less warm. Then I went in with a smudger brush again with Nana on the lower lash line just to pull that sort of warmth down and tie everything together. And then since I knew I didn't want to use liner in this look, I decided to go in with Iffy again on the top and lower lash lines with a really small like definer brush, almost as a liner, just to add a little bit of depth and fullness to the lash line. And then again, we're going to curl those lashes, we're going to pop on some mascara and throw on a lip product. This one's from Dose of Colors. And then this is the final look I created. I think this came out so pretty. It's a very colorful look, but it's still, to me, not like insanely over the top. Sometimes I feel like blues and purples can be a little bit difficult to wear, but I really, really like this. And then the last look that I created is the one that I'm wearing in this video. I wanted to go full out with the liner and the lashes and the whole 9 yards. And this time around, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit more like Mediterranean inspired. I really loved this shade here called Yara, which is like this really cool turquoise duochrome with almost like a golden champagne undertone to it. Really felt like that would be fun to use, and I wanted to put this guy all over my lid. So again, nothing too new here, using a big fluffy blending brush to blend Nana into the crease. This I kind of kept much more diffused and a little bit, you know, not too precise. I just wanted a nice wash of color to start with. Then I went in with a smaller, more precise blending brush in the shade Zakia. And this is like a much more deep burnt orange kind of shade. And I applied this into the lower crease, really keeping it kind of tighter and really building up the pigment. And then I just kind of blended that into Nana so it made a nice gradient in the upper portion of my crease. Then I went in with Yara using my fingers again to pat this all over the lid. Such a cool shade. Huge, huge fan of this. And then for the inner corner, I did a blend of Borunu and Nubia. I kind of felt like Nubia by itself was just like a little too intense of like a pure gold. So Borunu is a little bit more of like an antique gold, like a light bronzy kind of shade. So I ended up layering that on top of Nubia to create a sort of more champagne inner corner. Then I wanted to deepen things up a bit, so I used the shade Aja. At first I tried it with the brush, but I found it went on much better with my fingers because I really wanted it to be a little bit more intense. So I started by patting it on, and then I went in with the brush afterwards and I started to blend it. And I would add more pigment with my fingers and then use the brush to kind of smooth everything out. Then I wanted to re-intensify the color of that Zakia in my crease, so I went back in with my precise brush and just kind of re-intensified that warm shade there. And then I went back in again with my big fluffy blending brush that I was using in the beginning just to make sure I had no harsh edges along the top line of my crease. On my lower lash line, I started with the shade Nana on that pencil brush, and then I also added some of the shade Zakia to really intensify things, kind of just mimicking what I did on my top lid on my bottom lower lash line. Then I went in for some winged liner. I'm using my NYX Epic Ink Liner. This is something new to me that I've been really enjoying. So we're just gonna create a pretty fierce wing for this look. Then of course I popped on my mascara, some Ardell falsies, a little bit of nude lip, and here is my completed final look. I feel like this is one of those like serious, badass, I want to be super sexy and slay the day kind of looks. Definitely not something that I would wear for every day, but like for going out or for an event or something like that, I feel like this came out really cool. I love the combination of like the teal with the warm browns and the gold. I think it's a really, really pretty combination. So there you have it, guys. Those are the 3 looks that I created using the Juvia's Place Magic Palette. I hope this video was fun for you, especially if you were curious about this palette, or if you already own it and you were needing some inspiration of some looks to create. Honestly, I feel like I barely even scratched the surface with this guy. I feel like there are honestly so many looks that I could think of. I haven't done anything like silvery. You could do like a more traditional bronze eye. This green here though is like killing me. St. Patrick's Day, hello. If there's a palette that you guys would like to see me do this kind of video with next month, definitely let me know in the comments down below. I just did a video about my entire eyeshadow palette collection a couple weeks ago, so if you want to see what I already own and what I have, you can watch that video. I will link it for you guys in the description box. Let me know what you're curious about. I love hearing your feedback. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit that button before you go so that way you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. I hope you guys have an awesome, awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.